Hey my friends, welcome to this video where I'm going to show you how to use Clerk Webhooks and server action in NextJs application, and you're going to upload the data that you get from your Clerk Webhooks to your MongoDB database. Right here is the application that we're working on, and you can see it just has this NextJs logo and this join now. And if you go up a bit, you can see we have the sign in and sign up. So you can click on here to sign in. And if you don't have an account on this application, you can click right here to sign up. And then you can sign in with your username, email, and a password. And then you receive a verification mail, and then you have to put the codes that you receive right here. Success, and you're all signed in, and now you have this avatar right here. And the good thing is that this sign up that we just did is all from Clerk. But now we're able to get the data and send it to our MongoDB database. Right here, if you come here and refresh, you will see the user that we just created right here inside of MongoDB database. And we can also edit this user's information right here on this application, and it's going to reflect in our MongoDB database. So if we go right here and click on here and go to manage account, and then go to update username, for example, and then change it to Dominic and save. Now it's Dominic. And when you go back to MongoDB database and refresh, it changes to Dominic right here. And that goes for any data that is editable right inside of this application. And finally, if we click right here and go to manage account and go to security and delete this account, now the user has been deleted. That deletion will also reflect on our MongoDB database. So if I refresh the MongoDB database, you see that this user will be gone. We no longer have this user in our MongoDB database. And that's what we're going to be doing in this particular video. And this video is the part 2 of the first video that I did earlier on Clerk Webhooks and authentication in your NextJs application. So if you want to watch that video, you can check the link in the description below. And without further ado, let's jump right in. So on my VS Code right here, let me show you what we got. We have our NextJs application, and inside of the app folder, we have the API route. So this is where we connected Clerk Webhooks to our application from that last video. Inside of here, we're going to be trying to connect to MongoDB database and send our data from Clerk to our MongoDB database. You can either create a user if we receive a user that created from Clerk. So we'll create our user on the MongoDB database. If a user is deleted on Clerk, we also want to delete that user from our MongoDB database. And if a user is updated from Clerk, we also want to update the information, the data of that user on our MongoDB database. And you can see right here, we have these comments: call server action to update user on the database, call server action to delete user from database, and call server action to create user on the database. So we're going to be doing all of that inside of the route.ts file right here. And this is a dashboard. So the dashboard is the route that we're protecting right here, this particular page that says welcome to dashboard. And we're protecting it with the middleware.ts file right here. So if you go to the middleware.ts, you can see we have dashboard right here, and we're using the create route matcher to protect the dashboard route. So if a user is not signed in or logged in into our application, then the user will not be able to access any of these routes starting with /dashboard. We have the welcome route as well. The welcome route is accessible to any user, whether signed in or not. And we have our own custom sign in and sign up route. And then we have the layout, which is the layout for our application. And we have the roots of our application right here. So when we go to localhost /, then this is the page that shows up. And we're going to see what that page looks like in a moment. And we also have the components folder where we just have a header.csx component. And then we have a public folder right here that has an assets folder. And the assets folder has the icons folder and images folder. Instead of the icons folder, we're using the account.svg and signup.svg, which are just icons we're using on the header. We've talked about the middleware.ts is just a way for us to protect our routes or to make some routes accessible. And we have a bunch of other configuration files. So this is the file structure that we have from that last video. And what I'm going to do now is to start up the application so that we'll see what we have. I'm going to open up the terminal with Control backticks and then npm run dev to spin up the local host application. Now our application is running on localhost port 3000. I can come right here to my browser on the right and type in localhost 3000 and have it opened up right here. Now this is what our application looks like. And you can see we have the sign in button, we have the sign up button, and look at the icons that I have right here. And we can also click the join now right here, which also sends us to the sign up page, as well as the sign up right here. Any one of them is okay, just to have multiple ways of signing up on the platform. So this is the root of our application. And when I click join in or sign up, we'll be taken to the page where we'll be able to sign up. And just before I sign up on this application, I want to visit /dashboard. And you're going to see that we'll not be able to access that route. And that's because it's protected inside of the middleware.ts file right here. So let's try that. /dashboard. We'll get sent to a page to actually sign in instead. But if we visit /welcome, we're able to access the /welcome right here because this one is publicly accessible. That means any user, signed in or not, will always be able to access the welcome page. So let's go back to the root of the application, which is just localhost 3000, like so, and click on join in one more time. And I'm going to sign up. And then my password is going to be my password and sign up. So I'm going to receive a verification mail sent to me right here. And once I put in the code, I'll be able to get into the application. I'll be signed up and I'll be signed in at the same time automatically. So the code is 585867. So we'll get a success and we're signed in into the application. And as soon as we sign in, we'll get sent to the welcome page right here. And that's because if you go to the .env file right here, you see that we have the fallback redirect URL to welcome after sign up. So after we're done signing up, we'll get sent to this welcome page. And if we're done signing in, then we'll go to the dashboard page. That means if we visit /sign-in, localhost /sign-in, after signing in, we'll get sent to the dashboard route. And if we visit /sign-up, after signing up, we'll get sent to the /welcome page, which is the reason why we have the welcome page right here. So this is what we did in the last video. Now in this video, what we're going to do is to get the data or information from Clerk using the webhooks we set up in the last video, and then we use it to update our MongoDB database. So if we go here to the route, go to the API right here, and then to the route, we have codes here listening for when a user is created, when a user is updated, and when a user is deleted. Now, if a user is created right here, if the event type from Clerk is that the user is created, just like right now we created a user, then we want to grab the information of that user from Clerk, and that information is coming from event.data, and then we want to call a server action to create a user on our database, which is why I left the comment here. And we'll have the same thing for user deleted. We're going to call server action when we delete a user, or when a user deletes his or her account on our application. We also want to delete that user from our database. And if a user updates his data, the data is updated on Clerk, right? We also want to call server action to update that user on our MongoDB database. Right now we're signed in, we don't have any database. So this information about the user, like when we click on this avatar, we're seeing the username we chose here, username of Eldix. And if we click on manage account, we're seeing username, we're seeing the email we created right here. All this information is just on Clerk. We don't have this information ourselves. This application does not have this information. So that's the reason we're bringing in MongoDB database to update our own database. We'll have our own database of the users that we have on our application. So when a user signs up using Clerk, then we want to send that user's information to our own database. And let's visit our Clerk. So I'm going to open up a new tab right here and go to clerk.com. And then if you're not signed in, you can sign in. And if you don't have an account, you can sign up. I already have an account and I'm signed in. So let me go to the dashboard. Let me go to the application that we worked on the last time, and it's called NextAuth app. So for this NextAuth app, if we go to the users, we'll see that we just have one user, the one that we just created. You can see it says today at 6:21 p.m. This is my local time as of the time I recorded this video. And if you click on this user, you're going to see more information about this user. You see the email, and then here is the username. And if you have some other information such as the first name, last name, and all of that, you're going to see them here as well. I talked about this in that first video. So you're going to see all the information about the user here, and this is on Clerk. It's not our own personal database. And if we come to the app, for example, and let me update this user, go to manage account and update profile. Let me upload an image. Let me upload this image, and it's uploaded automatically. Now you see the image is going to get updated right here. And if you go to Clerk dashboard and refresh, you're going to see that this avatar will also be updated. Yes, right here, the avatar has been updated to my own personal image. So we want to make sure that all of this data, the picture, the email address, the username, and any other data or information we have on Clerk when the user signs up, we want to send all of this data to the database when we create a user. And if eventually we delete the user, so if, for example, I come here to delete the user by going to manage account and going to here and clicking on security and clicking on delete account. So assuming this user wants to delete his account on our application, now the user does no longer exist on Clerk. So if I can refresh right now, you see that this application will not have any user. You can see it says no users yet. Create a new user and all of that stuff. So if this happens on Clerk, we also want to update our MongoDB database when this happens on our application, right? So these are the things we're going to do, and we also want to update in case we update the user's information and all of that. Now, the first thing to do if we want to make this work is to create an account on MongoDB Database, sign in, and create an application right there for our current NextJs application. So in order to start using the database, we need to go to mongodb.com. And if you're not signed up yet on MongoDB, it's a very powerful platform to organize your data. Then you can sign up. And if you already have an account, you can sign in into MongoDB and create a project right there. So I'm going to click right here and then click on sign in. I'm going to put my email address right there. Right now, I'm signed in into my MongoDB database, and this is a dashboard. So we need to create a new application for our current project. So I'm going to go right here and then click on new project. And then I'm going to provide a project name. So for our project name on MongoDB, I'm going to say NextJs of Clerk, like so. And then you can set some tags if you want right here. These are not required. They are just optional. So I'm just going to leave it as it is and click on next. And then you want me to add members and set permissions. So no need for that. Automatically your account will be the default member, and I'm okay with that. I'm going to create projects. Yeah. And after that, we need to create a cluster, which is going to help us to choose our cloud provider, region, and specs, and all of that stuff. So click on create. So right here, I'm going to choose the free one right here. If you've got some money to spend, you can go on to choose this one, or you can choose this one as well. But I'm going to go with the free one. That's enough for our tutorial today. And scroll down here, you can change the cluster name if you want, but I'm going to leave mine as cluster 0, and provider will be AWS, and then the region will be Hong Kong. And after that, you can click on create deploy here, and now we have a page to help us connect to our cluster 0. And right here, we need to set up a username and a password. So I already have the username, and for password, I'm going to use something much more legible. I'm going to say 1234. And you can keep this in mind. You can try to remember the username and password because they're going to help us to connect to our MongoDB database from within our NextJs application. So after this, you can click on create database user. And then we're taken to this page to choose a connection method. Click on it, scroll down, and we're going to connect with drivers. Click on that and scroll down. And after a while, we're going to see a connection string that we're going to use from within our NextJs application to help us connect to our MongoDB database. And yes, we have our connection string right here. You can click on here to copy this connection string. You can also select everything manually yourself if you want. And then we can click on done right here. Yeah, and that's it. We've been able to set up our MongoDB database on mongodb.com. And the next thing to do is to go to network access, so that we'll be able to add the IP address that will have access to our MongoDB database. Currently, there is an active IP address right here. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, delete that. And I'm going to click on add IP address. And usually what you do is to add your current IP address. Right now, my current IP address is this number right here. But what I want to do is to allow access from anywhere. Mind you, in your real application you're going to get out there and everyone is going to be using, or you yourself want to be using, make sure you don't choose this allow access from anywhere. It is not recommended. I'm only going to choose this option for the sake of this tutorial because I have my virtual private network on, my VPN is on, and I need that to enable me work from within my location. So that's why I'm going to choose allow access from anywhere. For you, in your real world application, you can add current IP address or configure your IP address in other ways. So let me click on allow access from anywhere and click on confirm. So this IP address allows any computer to be able to access my database. And now that this is set up, we'll be able to connect and work with our MongoDB database. So now let's get back to our application and then get back to our VS Code and go to our .env.local file so that we can paste in that connection string that we got earlier from mongodb.com. So I'm going to come right here and say MongoDB URL equals and then paste everything right here. And if you look carefully, you can see that our name is here. The username was selected, in my case, Dominic Ebere, and then the password is app1234, as I stated earlier on MongoDB database. So make sure everything is correct right here. And after that, we can save and close off the .env file. Now, for us to be able to connect to our MongoDB database from our NextJs application, we need to install drivers that will help us to do that. So let's open up the terminal, country backticks, and this one is one running our server. So let me open up a new one, and then I'm going to install Mongoose and MongoDB, and then we'll have the npm install Mongoose, MongoDB. So these are the drivers that will help us to connect to our MongoDB database from within our NextJs application. And they're installing. Yeah, everything is installed and done and found no vulnerabilities. So let me close this off. And before that, let me clear out the terminal. I love to clear my terminal after installing some packages. So after that, I can close this off one more time. Now, the next thing we need to do is to come right here and right within our roots of our application, right within the next auth app. Make sure it's not within the app folder right here or components or any other folder for that matter, just within the root of our application. We're going to create a folder called the lib folder. And then within this lib folder, I'm going to create a file. I'm going to call it mongoose.ts. So instead of this mongoose.ts, we're going to be having the codes to help us hook or connect to our MongoDB database. And within the mongoose.ts file, I'm going to export an async function that will help us to connect to our MongoDB database. And I'm going to call it connectdb. And right here, I'm going to open a try and a catch block. And the catch will enable us to catch any error. And then we're going to log that error to the console, like so. And this should be async. Yeah. And within the try block, we're going to await mongoose.connect. You can see Mongoose will be coming from Mongoose right here, the driver we just installed. Press tab on your keyboard or click right here to import it automatically right here at the top. So mongoose.connect, and then as a first parameter, we're going to provide access to our connection string inside of the .env file right here, this MongoDB URL. So I'm going to say process.env.mongodb URL. And you make sure it's exact same spelling as you have it right here, MongoDB URL. In fact, I'm going to copy this right here and get back here and paste it. And as a second parameter, we can provide some set of options. So I want to set the DB name to NextAuth app. So this NextAuth app is going to appear on our MongoDB database when we eventually connect to the MongoDB database. So all the data we have will be stored under the NextAuth app right here, under the name NextAuth app. You can name it whatever you want, but I want to name it next auth app right here. And here we're having a red line under this one. Let's see why that is so. Okay, argument of type string or undefined is not assignable to parameter of type string. Okay, so what that means is that sometimes it's possible, TypeScript is saying it's possible that this MongoDB URL might be undefined. So in order to solve that, we can just give this exclamation mark right here to say that the MongoDB URL will always be available. Yeah, and we save. So this is what we have right here. We can await mongoose.connect and connect to our MongoDB database. And if there is any error, then we can catch the error and log it to the console. So if we want to make some query on our database, create, read, update, or delete, and all of that, we need to connect to the database first of all, and then we can now perform any query that we want to perform on the database. But then the very first time our application runs, the database would have been connected to, right? So we want to have a variable right here. We're going to use alert. I'm going to say is connected. So we want to have a way to check that if the database is connected already, in which case, if the database is connected already, then we don't want to try to run our try block again. All right. So we're going to make this is connected a Boolean value, and then it's going to be set to false at the beginning. Then after we done connecting to the database, then we want to set is connected to be true, like so. And there is a red line under the Boolean. Okay, this is supposed to be small letter b. And so before we even try to run the code in the try catch block, we want to run a check to see if we have already connected to the database. So we can say if is connected. So if it's connected is true, then what should we do? Then we want to return. So we're going to have a return statement so that we don't go into the try catch block. So we can return simply a console.log statement, and it's going to say database connected already, and we'll save. So this will run the check right here, will run first of all, and if we've already connected to the database, then there is no need to try to connect to the database again. And we also want to check if our MongoDB connection string right here is also available. So we can say if not process.env .mongodb URL, then we should return something as well. So we can just return a console.log statement as well. You can say problem with MongoDB connection string and save. We have two checks right here. If there is a problem with the MongoDB URL, then we're going to return a console.log statement. And if our database is already connected, we're also going to return this console.log statement. Otherwise, then it means that we need to connect to the database. And lastly, we want to set Mongoose strict query. So we want to say mongoose.set strict query to true. And this means that any query that we're making to our database should be based on the data that we have in our database. So for example, we can query our database based on the ID of the user, based on the username, based on the email, based on the phone number, first name, last name, and things like that. Data that are available on the database, not data that are not available. So we cannot query the database, for example, based on genotype of user if we don't have a genotype stored for that user. And yeah, this is what we're going to have, and then we save. So this mongoose.ts will help us to connect to our MongoDB database. We'll have the connectDB function that we're going to call each time we want to connect to the database. Now we can close this one off and also close this one off. So now the next thing for us to do is to have a model and a schema for the data that will be stored in our database. Schema generally gives the structure of the data that we're going to be storing inside of the database. For example, a user data would have the username of the user, the name, the first name, last name, phone number, and so on and so forth of the user. Then the model is going to help us to wrap up that user schema, and then we'll be able to make queries using the model. Now let's go right here within our application to see how that works. We're going to go inside of the root of our application, and we're going to create a folder. So let me click on here. I'm going to call it models. And inside this models, I'm going to be creating a file. I'm going to be calling it user.model.ts. And right within this file, we're going to create a schema that is the structure of the data that we're going to be storing on the database. So I can use new schema, and it's going to be coming from Mongoose as well. So click on here to import it automatically. There should be new schema like so. And then to this schema, we're going to provide the structure of that data. So right here, I'm going to have the structure of the data. So the data will be having username, which is going to be of type string, and it's going to be required. It's going to also have email. It's going to also have clerk ID. All of this defines the structure of the data that we're going to be storing inside of our MongoDB database. And in fact, we can also have a picture, which is going to be the URL of the avatar of that user. We can also store it as well. It can be of a type string with capital letter S, like so. Not necessarily required. So we can have it like this. So this is the structure of the data. Now I can store this inside of a const and call it user schema. And down here, I'm going to create a const, and I'm going to have user model, and that's going to be equals model user schema. So what we're trying to do here is we're going to use the model to wrap up our schema. And mind you, this model is going to be coming from Mongoose as well. You can click on here to import it. Model and schema all coming from Mongoose. So we're using the model right here to wrap up our user schema that we've already defined right here. In common applications, you're going to have models for different data. So you can have in an e-commerce project, models for the product, models for the different sort of users, for the admin, for the vendors, for the delivery personnel, and so on and so forth. When we run our application and try to connect to the MongoDB database for the first time, then the model for the user will be created right here. But when we want to access that model for the second time, we don't need to create the model again because it's been created. So that model would have been inside of the models list. So we can just say models dot user like so, or model user like this. So what this is saying is that any model that we create inside of our application will be installed inside of models. So we can either access that models.user, models.product, and so on and so forth. Or if it doesn't exist, it means we've not created that model for the very first time, in which case this code will now run to create the model for the first time. And in subsequent time, we just have access to the models.user. And these models should be coming from Mongoose as well. So we need to also import it. Yeah, so we have models.user, and if the user does not exist inside of the models, then we're going to create it for the first time. And subsequently, it's going to be accessible from models.user. So we're storing all of this inside of the user model. So that means we need to export the user model. So I'm going to say export default user model like so, and save. So yeah, we've created the schema right here for our user, and then we also have the model. So this model is what is going to allow us to make queries on the database. So we can have something like user model dot delete user, user model dot create user, user model dot find one and update, and stuff like that. And now that we're done creating the schema and the model, it is time to create the server action. That is the functions that will help us to now contact our database. So right here within our application, I'm going to create a folder. Remember, it should be within the root of our application. I'm going to create a folder, not within the models. I'm going to call it actions. So this folder will contain all of the actions, the server actions that we're going to be having inside of our application. And within the actions folder, I'm going to have user.action.ts like so. And if you want to learn more about what server actions are, you can check the link in the description below to my YouTube tutorial where I talk a whole lot about NextJs server action. You're going to understand server action and how it works. And I did that in association with forms in NextJs. You're also going to learn about forms, how to use the different hooks such as use form status, use form state, and so on and so forth. So check the link in the description below. Now for server action, I'm going to have a directive here that says use server. So this use server directive means that any function that we have right inside of this file is going to be a server action. So right here I can export an async server action. I'm going to call it create user. This function is going to help us to create a user on our MongoDB database. And this function will be having parameters, user params, and the user params is going to be of type create user params. Yet to create this, so what I'm going to do is come right here in the root of our application, and then I'm going to create a file called shared.types.d.ts, like so. So within this file, I'm going to define what the create user params is going to look like. So let me come right here, and I'm going to have interface. It's going to be of type interface create user params, like so. And it's going to have clerk ID, which is going to be of type string. It's going to have username, going to be of type string. It's also going to have email, which is going to be of type string, and then it's going to have picture of type string. And you can see it closely follows the data we also have here, the username, email, clerk ID, and picture for the model, right? Let me close up the model. So let me save this. So this is for create user params. So that means that the params we're going to be passing to the create user function is going to look like this. It's going to have a clerk ID, username, email, and a picture. This is just for TypeScript. Remember, we're using TypeScript. Okay, so instead of the function now, what do we want to do? We want to open up a try catch block, because anytime you're working with a database, you want to always work with a try catch block. And you're going to get any error that might occur, and then console.log that error, like so. And instead of the try block, we're going to await, and then we're going to call that model, the user model we created. So I'm going to say user model dot create right here. And then to this create, we're going to pass the user params, like so, and save. So you can see how we've used the model right here, the user model, to say dot create, and it has a whole bunch of other function that we can use. It has dot find one and delete, find one and replace, find by ID and delete, find by ID, find, and it has create as well. That is, it has create collection, create indexes, and all of that, all on the user model. But for now, we just want to create a user on the database. So we create the user using the user params, which looks like the data we have here inside of the create user params. Okay, so that means we've successfully created a server action to be able to create a user on our MongoDB database. And since we're done creating the server action, that means we can now go back to our route.ts file and then try to use the create user function right there. So let's find the route.ts instead of the app folder, instead of the API, and then route.ts. So right here within our route.ts file, if the event type is user created, that means if a user is created on the Clerk, on our application, we now want to call server action to create a user on the database. So we're going to come down here and await, and then we call the create user function we created, the server action, and it's going to be coming right here. You can see, you can click on here to import it automatically right here. So we await that create user, and we now pass in the parameters right here. So we have the clerk ID, and the clerk ID will be the ID right here. Remember, we've already destructured all of this coming from event.data. So clerk ID will be ID, and then we also have username. Username will be username, and then we also have email, and email will be email address or email addresses 0.email address, like so. And then we're also going to have picture. Picture will be the URL of the avatar or any image stored on Clerk. So let's also accept that. Let's get the image. I think it's called image URL. Yes, this image URL. So we're going to have picture as image URL, like so. So for username, let's see what we're having this red line right here. It's saying type string or null is not assignable to type string. So what it's trying to say is that username can be null some of the time. So TypeScript is just trying to make sure that we have the right thing here, to make sure that we're not trying to pass the value of null as the value for this username right here. So what we can do is just say it's either username, or we can have a string of a username. We can just say my user like this. But definitely we're going to be having the username coming right here from Clerk. This is just for TypeScript safety, all right? And we save. And here, everything is set up. So we've been able to create a MongoDB database. We created our schema and our model, and we created our ConnectDB function to help us connect to our MongoDB database. And we're able to connect to the database. And then we have our server action right here, which can help us to create a user on the database. And then instead of the route.ts, we're calling the server action right here to create that user. So everything is set up well. Now it is time to test things out to see if we sign up a user on our application, if that user's data will be also created on our database right here. And in order to do that, we need to commit our code so far so that it's going to reflect on the GitHub repository, on the remote GitHub repository. And you know, from there, Vessel, where we have our deployed application, is going to take it up from there and redeploy our application. And before we actually commit our code, I want to create a new branch called MongoDB Database, because currently we're still on the webhooks branch. If you look right here, we're on the webhooks branch. So what I'm going to do is click right here, create a new branch, and I'm going to call the branch MongoDB, and then click on enter. So right now we are now on MongoDB. So I'm going to come right here and commit all of our code so far by saying done with basic MongoDB, and then commit. And it's going to go into the MongoDB branch, and I'm also going to publish the branch as well. So now if I publish the branch, everything will be updated on our GitHub repository, on our remote GitHub repository. Now let's go to our Vessel where we have the deployed application. So I'm going to click on here and go to vessel.com. Right now we don't have the deployed application on Vessel because I took it down after the last video. So what I'm going to do now is to actually create a new project and deploy the application again. So I'm going to click on here to say add new, and then click on project. So this is for a new project, and it's going to be taken from here. So Vessel will have access to the projects on my GitHub repository. And this is the one I want to import, the NextJs app. This is the app that we're working on, and it's also available on the GitHub repository. So I'm going to click on import right here, and then you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to leave it as NextJs app, and then scroll down where we have environment variables. So right here, we need to put in all of our environment variables so that things can work properly. So I'm going to come right here, go to the .env file, and select all of this, and then come right here and paste them. Yes, everything is pasted in for us automatically. And then I'm going to deploy. So now it's deploying our application on Vessel. And if everything goes successfully, our application will be deployed on Vessel and we'll be able to test things out. And once our application is deployed on Vessel successfully, it means we also have to go to Clerk dashboard where we have the webhooks and edit the URL we have there for the webhooks. So right here we have congratulations, we just deployed a new project to my projects. Yeah, so it means that our project has been deployed successfully. Now I'm going to click on continue to dashboard. Yeah, continue to dashboard, and we'll have it right here. So I can click on deployment, and you can see we just have the application running here. You can click on this, and then I'm going to copy this URL that I have right here. So let me expand the window a bit. Yeah, I'm going to copy the NextJs app 6 alpha vessel.app. Copy, and then I'm going to go to Clerk again, And then for the next auth app that we have, I'm going to click on configure and then scroll down to where we have webhooks right here. And you can see this is the one we set up from the last time. So I'm going to click on it. And now the URL has changed. Previously, it was this next auth app and whatever. We changed this a whole lot of times, right? Now the latest deployed app is this one. So I'm going to come right here and click on edit and put this. So each time you have a new deployed application, you're going to have a new URL right there. The first one, the very first one right here. This is one that you're going to copy. And whenever you make a commit on GitHub and push to the remote repository, a new build will be up there for us, and it's still going to retain the name, the current URL that we just copied, this one right here. But if you have a totally new project, just like we just created right now, then the URL is going to change. So pay attention to that. So now we'll copy this one. We've pasted it right here. Make sure it's written like this: https next.app6alpha.vessel.app/API/webhooks, right? So I'm going to save this. This is going to be the latest one, and everything should be up and running. So let's go back to our Vessel and then click on here to view our deployed application on Vessel. Yes, our application is up and running, and currently we don't have any users. So if we go right here, you can see we don't have any user for this application. So now let's create a user and see if the user gets created on our MongoDB database. If we go to the clusters on MongoDB database, we don't have any user currently. As we shall see, browse collections and retrieving list of database, and nothing right here at the moment. So let's get back to our deployed application and click on sign up. So let's put a username of LDix and email address, and password is going to be my password, and click on continue. And I'm going to receive a verification mail. So let me put in the code in that mail: 963973. And success if everything goes on well. Yes, it does. And voila, we come to the welcome page. How awesome is that? So that means we've been able to sign up a user, and of course the user has been logged in or signed in automatically. That's how Clerk works. And let's get to our database and see if the user has been created as well right here. Okay, we don't have the user created right here. So let's go to Vessel where our deployed application is running and expand the window a bit and see what the problem might be. Let's go to logs. All right, you can see we have the /API webhooks, and right here I can actually select just the ones that I want to be able to see. So I just want to see the API webhooks only, and we have received 2 requests right here. And right here you can see we have our user. This is a console.log statement right here. So let me see, go back to our route, and you can see we got this right there. So it means that we're able to run that properly. Yeah, and we got this log statement. So it means that everything ran correctly, but for some reasons we're not able to see the user created on the database. Let me refresh and see. So right now what we can do is to inspect things a bit, because it seems everything is set up correctly. So let's go to deployments, and right here I can see that the source is webhooks, and currently we're in MongoDB where we finished up with this code, right? So the source should be MongoDB, not webhooks. And if we go to our GitHub repository, we have the NextJs app right here. Click here and go to MongoDB. So this is the branch we should be working with. So what I'm going to do is go back to our Vessel and then click on here, and then click on this application, and then go to settings, and then go to Git, and then change this from webhooks to MongoDB and save. So now we should be working with MongoDB. And for that, what I'm going to do is come back to deployments and I'm going to just make a little change right here and commit this code again and push to the remote repository. So I can just say our user is, just to add something here, and save, and then come back right here and then say little change and commit, sync changes. Now after syncing changes to the remote repository, then a new application will start up for us again. So you can see now the branch is now MongoDB and no longer webhooks. So sometimes you need to take care of these things. So let's say it's building, and after building, hopefully everything will work correctly. And let me go back to application right here and delete this user. So let me go to manage account and go to security and delete this account so that we don't have any user. Remember, we're trying to create a user on our MongoDB database when a user signs up on our account. So let's delete that user and we'll sign up one more time. Yes, the user has been deleted successfully. Now let's go back to our Vercel, and we have the currently deployed application. This was the first one. This one is the second one. Let's click right here. And you can see it's still having the URL as I told you earlier on, because this is a deployed version, the current version. So there is no need to make any change on the Clerk Webhooks. So yeah, so now I can actually close the one we have here and close our GitHub right here, and then click on this to open the application one more time. So the application has no user because we just deleted it. So let's try to sign up one more time. Click on the sign up, and then username is going to be Eldix, and email is going to be my email, and then password is going to be my password, and click on continue. And I received the verification code 194100. Success. And yes, we get into the welcome page right there. So now it's time to cross our fingers and go to our MongoDB database one more time to see if we got that user created. So right here, let's refresh. Okay, and the user is not right there. Now let's go to Vercel and go to logs. Now we're getting some errors, so let's expand the window and see what we got the error. Okay, saying task timed out after 10 seconds and all of that. That's the error we got right here. Okay, gateway timed out. But right here, we're getting this as well, the log statement. And if you look down here, the only message we're getting on this /API/webhooks route is that task timed out after 10 seconds. And that's something to do with the network. So let's go back to MongoDB database and go to the network access and see, okay, currently we have this IP address. So let me delete this one, and let me delete this one as well, and then add IP address. So I'm going to allow access from anywhere. Remember, this is not recommended. And I'm also going to add my current IP address. Let me minimize the window one more time. Yeah, so we've added access from everywhere, and we've also added access from this particular IP address. Okay, now let's go back here to our clusters and then browse collections. Okay, still empty. And then let's come back to our application and delete this user and try to sign up one more time. Manage account, go here, security, and then delete account. Yes, user deleted one more time. So it's time for us to try to sign up on this app again and see everything should work properly because we've set things up to work. This error is a network error, the network timeout and all of that stuff. So let's try it again and see. And let me make this to have only logs for the API/webhooks route. Let's see. And in fact, before we try this out again, let's go to Clerk dashboard and go to configure and go to webhooks right here and check the URL again. We're having next auth app 6alpha.vercel. Let's make sure it's the same thing we have here. next auth app 6 alpha.vercel.app. Yeah, we'll have the correct thing right there. And let's click here to see some of the messages we've received. So you can see we have succeeded, user deleted, failed for user created, failed for user created, and all of that. Okay. Now let me minimize the browser's window one more time and get back to our application right here. All right, let's try this one more time. Sign up or join now. And let's have the username of LDix, email address, and a password, and put in the verification code 920598. Success. And user created one more time. So let's go to the cluster and refresh. And yet we're yet to have the data right there. All right, we're still not getting the data on our MongoDB database. So let's go back to Vercel and see what logs we get. Expand the window a bit and refresh. This seems to be a network error because we're still getting these logs. Our user is right here, but then we're unable to create the user on our MongoDB database. So what I'm going to do is actually wrap this up. I'm going to say const created is equals this one, and then I'm going to return a NextJs response like so. I have a comma and say user created. Okay, and I'm going to wrap this up in curly braces and then have this one as message like so and save. Yeah, so that means we need to redeploy this application one more time. So let's try to do that. We're going to commit this, just few changes, and commit on the MongoDB branch and sync changes to the remote repository on GitHub. And yeah, right now a new one should be up for us, should be spinning up for us. So let's go back to deployment and let's click on here and click on here and go to deployment. And yes, a new one is building for us. And you can see the commit message, just few changes right here. So let's see, let's wait and see if everything goes well this time. And this is ready. So let's go to our application first of all and delete this user one more time. Now let's click into the most recent deployed version and delete this one actually, and click on here and try to sign up. Username LDix, my email address, my password, and I'm going to put in the verification code 076081. Success. Yep. Okay, and we're taken to the welcome page. Now let's go back to our MongoDB database and see. Refresh. Not yet. We're not getting that at the moment. Let's go back to Vercel, expand the window and go to logs. And yet we're still getting this task timed out message. So there must be a problem with the network somewhere. Okay, so what I'm going to do, since we're still getting the network error, is to inspect our code. So let's go to the user.action.ts file and see we're waiting the user model.create. And in fact, what I'm going to do is create a const and say new user, and then we're going to return the user like so. So we're returning new user from the create user function, and if there is any error, we're going to catch the error right here. So we are waiting the create user, and after it's going to return the new user. We've made the changes, and now let's try to save again. Let's commit our application and say more changes, commit and sync. And yet a new application will be spinned up for us. Yeah, this is usually the process. Sometimes these things happen. We just take the time to figure out why and deal with it. But I'm sure we're getting this API/webhooks hit because we're getting these logs right here. But then we're having a network issue. Task is timing out after 10 seconds for some reasons. So let's go back to deployment and click right here. Actually, go back to the app and go to deployments, and then we should have the next one building up for us because we just made a commit on our remote GitHub repository. And again, I'm going to delete the user, manage accounts, and delete the user. Okay, now this one is current and is ready. So it's still the same URL. And let's close this one and open this one. And then go to join now to sign up. And sign up with LDix. And my password, verification mail, 443187, success. And here we'll go to the welcome page. So let's get back here and see, browse collections. Okay, we're still not getting what we need right here. And I'm wondering why we're not getting this in our database. Let's go to the Clerk and look here and refresh to see what we have so far. You can see the user created is failing and the user created is failing. So there must be some issues, right? Let's go to the logs, expand a bit. Okay, vessel runtime timeout error. Let's go back to deployment. Our database set up and running correctly. I think I know what the problem might be. Right here we have the mongoose.ts, right? Where we're able to connect to our MongoDB database. Pretty good. Let me close this shared.types file. And instead of our user action, we were trying to connect to the MongoDB database. We did not call the connectDB function right here coming from the lib/mongoose. So we did not call this function, and this must be the reason, because we need to call and connect to the database before we're able to make any query, or before we're able to create or delete or update any data on the database. So this must be the reason we're not able to create our data on the database. So now let me connect to DB, and that function is actually an async function, so we can actually await it and save. And this time around, everything should actually work properly. So this must be the reason, because we did not connect to the database. We did not call this function. How I missed that, and it's made us to run up and down trying to find where the problem is. Okay, now let's commit this. So let me have a message saying connected now, and commit, sync changes. And we're going to have yet again a redeployed version of our application on Vessel. Sometimes it's good you go through all this, because it's going to help you know how to debug your application when you have issues. So let's go to deployment, and we'll have a new one building up for us right there. And yes, it is done already. So what we can do now is to delete the current user we have for this application, so we can test things out one more time. And yes, it's deleted, and close this one off, and then go to the recently deployed application, redeployed, and click on here and click sign up, and have our username as LDix, and put the verification code 862244436. Success. And yes, we are sent to the welcome page. Now let's go to our MongoDB database and refresh. And yes, we have our users finally. So that error we're getting right here on the logs was because we did not connect to the database. Now I'm going to select the API webhooks only. And now we're getting all 200 status code, right? How awesome is that? And you can see the data we have right here. We have the ID, we have the username, email, clerk ID, picture, which is the URL of the current avatar we have on our deployed application. You can see this one right here. Yeah, and good, we're getting our user on our database. So from here we can do anything that we want to do on this data. We now have our own user database. Awesome. So the next thing I'm going to do now is come right here and go to the route. So we can also flesh out the ones for our user.deleted and user.updated. So for user.deleted, if the user deletes his account, just like we've been doing on this application, going to here and going to manage accounts and deleting the user, then we also want to delete the user from the database. We don't want the user to be available on the database as well, right? So let's do that. And in order to do that, we need to go to useraction.ts and export another function, and we're going to call it delete user. It's going to be an async function as well, and then it's going to have a try and catch block. So if we get any error while trying to do all of that, then we just want to log it to the console like so. And then within the try block, we want to await connect DB. Remember, we shouldn't forget to call this function, and then we can try to delete the user. Meanwhile, this delete user is going to have a param, so I'm going to say delete params like so, and it's going to be of the type delete user params. You can see the pattern right here. So any parameter you're going to be supplying to the function, it should be of a certain type. In this case, it's going to be of delete user params. So we need to define that in our shared.types file. So I'm going to copy this and then go right here and go to our shared.types file. If I can find it right here, and then define an interface called delete user params, and it's just going to have clerk ID. We just want the clerk ID only of type string, and save and close it off. And now we can destructure clerk ID from the delete user params that we passed to this delete user. So I can say const, and I'm going to destructure the clerk ID. It's coming from delete user params like so. And then I'm going to await user model.find1 delete clerk ID. So we're going to find the user by the clerk ID. You can see right here, any user we have on our database is going to have the clerk ID right here, and we're going to find the user using that clerk ID, and then we can delete that user. So I'm going to store this in a variable, in a const deleted will be equals await user model.find1 and delete like so. And we also want to check if the user we want to delete does not exist. So if not deleted user, then we want to throw an error, throw new error that says user does not exist like so. And why are we having a red line here? Okay, this is supposed to be deleted like so. And then at the end of the day, we want to return the deleted user and save. Yeah, so this is for our delete user function, our server action right here. We're going to get the clerk ID from the params and then delete the user and then return the deleted user right here. So now it means we can go to our route.ts file, and under the comments for the call to server action, we can await and then call delete user right here, and it's coming from the actions, and we're going to pass in the params of clerk ID. So we're going to say clerk ID will be this, the ID from right here. And let's see what we have in the red line here. It's saying type string or undefined is not assignable to type string. Okay, it's saying that this ID can be undefined as well. So we can just put this to say that is going to be available, and it's coming from the event.data right here, and save. So this is for our user deleted. For when a user deletes his account, then we want to also delete that user from the database. And lastly, for our user.updated, we want to update the user information when a user updates his information. So what we're going to do is, again, come here and flesh out a server action for the updation. So I can export an async function and call it update user, like so, and have a try catch block that will get the error, and console.log the error. And within the try block, I'm going to await connect DB. We always need to connect to the database first of all before we make any query, and then we can then await and save for now. So this update user is also going to receive params, so I can call it update params, and it's going to be of type update user params, like so. And then we can copy this and define it as well. So let's go to shared.types right here and define it as well. Interface update user params, and this update user params is going to be similar to the create user params. So what I'm going to do is just copy all of this and paste right here. If you want, you can also use the create user params directly, but I just want to have separate interfaces for all of this. So I'm going to save this and then come back right here to our action, and then destructure all the things that should be coming from the update params. So I can have const, you can have the clerk ID, you can have the email, you can have the username, you can also have the picture. So these are the things that we can actually update. So they're coming from the update params, like so. And then we can now await user model dot find by ID and update, this one right here. And to this, we're going to pass in the parameters to find by ID and update. So the first parameter will be the clerk ID right here. So we want to find the user by clerk ID, then comma, then we'll give the data that we want to be able to update, right? So I can have the dollar and set and open another set of curly braces. So we want to update the email just in case the user updates the email, right? And we also want to update username, and also want to update the picture, like so, and save. Yeah, so this is what we want to update. We want to update the email, username, and picture by this clerk ID. So we've supplied about 2 params to define by ID and update function. Remember, this email is just as good as saying email will be email, like so, but there's no need to repeat ourselves since it's the same, exact same spelling. So the email we have right here, you can see on the database, should be set to the email coming from Clerk that the user must have updated. The username right here, which is right here instead of the database, should be set to the username coming right here from Clerk as well. And the same thing for the picture, but there is no need to do it this way. We can just have 1 and 1 like this. This is already enough. And the last thing we can do is to have this to say new to be true. So it means that we should have the updated value inside of our MongoDB database. So this is what we're going to work with for the update user. And if there is any error while trying to handle this, then we're going to log it to the console. Okay, so we fleshed out the update user function and the delete user server function as well. And now it's time for us to test things out. Okay, so now let's go to our route.ts and go to the user.updated. So if the user's data is updated, then we want to call the server action. So we can say await, what's await, because it's an async function. So we'll have update user, like so, and we'll pass in the params that we want right here. And when we go up right here, we have the user created when we try to create user. So we can pass this same param. So let me copy this right here and paste this right here. And for the picture, you can have image URL coming from image URL right here. So let me destructure that as well. Yeah. So just in case the user changes the avatar right here, if you upload a new image, the URL of that image will be gotten from here, and then we can set it right here for the picture. And we can also update the username if the user updates the username, and so on and so forth. All right, so this is what we have. So I'm going to save on my VS Code and now make another commit. So I'm going to say all fleshed out like so, and commit, and sync changes to the remote repository on GitHub. And just as you know, a new application will be spinned up for us. So let's go to the vessel. Where is vessel? Right here. And then let's go here. Let me expand the window a bit, and then click back here on the NextJs app and go to deployments. And you can see the new one is spinning up for us. So let's wait for that. All right, now we have the redeployed version of the application. So let's click on here and then close the former application that we have and click on here. It opens it up one more time. And of course we have our user, right? So let's see how we can update this user information. Now, first of all, let's try to delete this user and see if the user gets deleted on our MongoDB database. If I refresh, you see that we still have this data, this one user we have just created. So let me refresh. And here we have about so many users, right? So what I'm going to do is just delete all of these users. Normally what we do is, in trying to create a new user, you make sure that new user with the same primary key is not created on the database to avoid duplication, right? So let's delete this one. We're just testing things out, and let's get back to application. And first of all, let's delete this account, the user account. And then now let's try to create a new user. So sign up and a new user and notification, verification, and here. So let's go back to our MongoDB database and refresh. The user should come back right here. The new user we just created. Currently, we're having about 3 users created at the same time instead of our MongoDB database. So what I'm going to do is go to the Clerk dashboard and go to users to see how many users we have here. We just have 1 user. And it's funny that it's creating about 3 different users at the same time. And that's because we need to make the email to be unique so that we don't have users with the same email created on our database, right? So let's go back here, go back to the model, go to user model, and right here after required of true, then we can make unique to be true as well, so that we only have just 1 unique user, so that we don't have duplicate users on our database. All right, this is the wrong import, and save right here. So that means we need to commit yet again. All right, so we're going to do just that, but before that, we can actually delete this user right here. So let's delete the whole collection, user, and drop. Yeah, and also go to the app and delete the user and start all over again. And yeah, the user is gone. And now we can save or commit our application. So you can say all good and commit and sync changes so that a new version of the app will be redeployed for us. Now let's go to this place, to the project, your project, and click on the NextJs app and go to deployment, and the next one is already building right here. So let's wait for it to flesh out, and then we'll try everything once again. So at the end, we should be able to create our user and have them on the database. We should delete the user, update the user, and have everything reflected on our MongoDB database. All right, the new and latest redeployed version of our application is ready. So I'm going to click on here, and it's still the same name right here. So let me close this one off and click on here again. And we need to sign up and have the same username of LDix and email address. And my password is going to be my password. Put in the verification code 520861. Success. And yes, we'll get sent to the welcome page. So now let's go back to our MongoDB database and refresh. And yes, we'll have the users back. And now we just have only one user. Awesome. And that means we can go back to application right here. And let's update the avatar of this user. If you go to MongoDB database, you can see that the URL is right here, EYJ0 right here. So now let's update the user profile image, the avatar. So I'm going to click on update profile, upload, and upload an image of myself. And yes, I've already updated that. So now let's go to MongoDB database and refresh. I'm not sure if everything changed correctly, but what we can do is try to change the username and email. So let's go back here and click on the avatar and manage accounts and update username. So let me say LDix Dominic and save. Okay, so let's connect this and save again. Yeah, so we have a new username. Now let's go to MongoDB database and refresh. And it didn't quite change yet. And that means there must be a problem with our code right here. And so looking at the code that we have right here in our user action, we're using find by ID and update. And that means we are going to be finding by this ID right here, the MongoDB ID, the one in red right here. But that's not what we're doing. We're finding by Clerk ID. And in that case, we should be using find one and update, not find by ID and update. So we should be using this right here. This is the correct one to use since we're going to be finding by one of the attributes of the data that we have, which is Clerk ID, not the ID right here. If it was the ID, then we can use find by ID and update. Okay, so let's save this. And these are the little things that can actually bug our code and make us frustrated. But it's good we're going through all this and learning some of these things. Okay, so now let's commit our application one more time. I'm going to type finally committed. This will be our last commit on GitHub and sync changes. And just as you know, a new one will be redeployed for us. So let me click on here and go to the application and click on deployments and wait for this new one to build up, and we shall visit that page again. And if what we can do it also is to actually delete the user. So let's delete the user, go to manage accounts and come right here, security, and then delete account. Yeah, and close this one off and wait for this one to finish building. Yeah, it is done. So we'll click on it and we'll visit the URL right here. And then we can sign up or join now. So let's click right here to sign up. I'm going to sign up with the username of LDix and my email address and password. Success. And yeah. And if we go to our database and refresh, now we have that user. Yes, right here. Okay, elites. Okay, I spelled the LDix incorrectly, so I can quickly manage accounts, update username, and change it to LDix instead. And LDix Dominic. And save. So if we go to our MongoDB database and refresh, you see the username changes to LDix Dominic. right here. So that means we're able to also update the user data on our MongoDB database, and that goes for any data that we update on right here. Okay. And if we delete the user, so if I go to manage account and go to security and go to delete account and delete, now the user account has been deleted. So if we go to our MongoDB database and refresh, we should not find that user anymore. So you can see the user does not exist on our database. So that, my friends, brings us to the end of this tutorial, where we've been able to use our MongoDB database in conjunction with our application. So we use webhooks, we receive information or data from Clerk Webhooks, and then we use it to update our database, our MongoDB database. And of course, we can store any sort of data that we want to be able to store on our own database. We just have to write it here in the model. We can store genotype, whatever thing we want to store, right? And that's the cool thing about having our own separate database. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to my channel if you like the content that I bring to you. It helps me a whole lot. And see you in the next one.